In 2026, some of the biggest changes affecting your life won't arrive with protests, breaking news, or loud political fights. In fact, most people won't even notice them until it's too late. According to policy projections, millions of older adults could be financially affected by small legal adjustments hidden inside routine updates. One quiet rule can change how your home is treated, another can delay pension access, and another can quietly reshape how healthcare decisions are made. No headlines, no warnings, just consequences. If you live in London, Manchester, Birmingham, Leeds, or anywhere in the UK, this matters to you. This isn't about panic. It's about awareness. Because when laws change silently, those who don't pay attention usually pay the highest price. Stay with me. What you're about to hear could protect years of hard work. Number 1. Care costs. One of the most underestimated changes arriving in 2026 sits quietly inside care funding rules, but its impact can be life-altering. Under updated frameworks, the way assets are assessed for long-term care is becoming far more rigorous. Homes, savings, and even certain transfers made years earlier are increasingly visible to local authorities when care is needed. For many seniors, this breaks a long-held assumption that the family home is automatically protected. In high-value areas like London, Brighton, and Bristol, this shift carries particular weight because property values alone can push people above funding thresholds, even if their day-to-day income is modest. What makes this change unsettling is not just the financial impact, but the timing. Care decisions often arrive suddenly, after a fall, an illness, or a rapid change in mobility, when families are under pressure and options narrow fast. At that point, planning becomes reaction, and reaction is usually more expensive. Policy briefings increasingly point to a system designed to recover costs rather than absorb them, meaning assets can move from being a safety net to being a funding source almost overnight. The practical lesson here is not fear, but foresight. Early planning keeps control in your hands. Understanding how assets are counted, knowing what is and isn't protected, and having conversations with family before urgency takes over. Seniors who plan early tend to choose when and how decisions are made. Those who don't are often left responding to rules they never knew existed. In 2026, care costs are no longer just a health issue. They are a structural financial reality, and awareness is what separates choice from pressure. Number 2. Pension access. Pension access in 2026 is changing in ways that are easy to miss but difficult to ignore once they affect you. The adjustments aren't dramatic announcements about pensions being removed. Instead, they arrive quietly through changes in timing, eligibility checks, and updated conditions attached to when and how payments begin. For many seniors, the biggest shock is discovering that access no longer happens exactly when they expected. Small shifts in qualifying dates, contribution verification, or residency checks can delay payments just long enough to create financial strain. In cities like Liverpool, Sheffield, and Newcastle, where a large number of retirees rely heavily on predictable pension income rather than private investments, even a short delay can disrupt monthly budgeting and household stability. What makes this change particularly challenging is that many people assume pensions are automatic once a certain age is reached. In reality, updated systems increasingly rely on accurate records, digital confirmations, and timely responses to official correspondence. A missing document, an unreported change in circumstances, or a misunderstood letter can slow the entire process. Official pension notices in 2026 carry more weight than ever before, and seniors are expected to read them carefully rather than skim them. Dates, contribution summaries, and eligibility statements now require closer attention, because errors are not always corrected automatically. Another subtle shift is the growing link between pensions and other state systems, meaning information is cross-checked more frequently. This can be helpful when records are accurate, but problematic when they are outdated. The key issue isn't that pensions are disappearing. It's that access is becoming more conditional and more procedural. Seniors who double-check notices, confirm details early, and understand their specific pension status reduce the risk of unpleasant surprises. In 2026, pension access is less about age alone and more about alignment with updated rules, accurate data, and timely action. Small details that now carry big consequences. Number 3. Council tax. Council tax is becoming one of the quietest but most consistent pressure points for seniors in 2026. New frameworks give local councils greater flexibility to raise revenue, adjust bans, and tighten enforcement, often without dramatic announcements. Rather than a single nationwide increase, changes appear locally, shaped by council budgets, social care costs, and housing pressures. This means where you live now matters more than ever. In cities such as Birmingham, Nottingham, and Leeds, councils are under increasing strain to fund adult social care, housing support, and local services, and council tax is one of the few levers they can realistically pull. For seniors, the concern is not just higher bills, but how those bills are calculated. Property banding, occupancy rules, and eligibility for reductions are being reviewed more actively. Homes that have not been reassessed in years may suddenly come under scrutiny, especially if surrounding property values have risen or if household circumstances have changed. Many older homeowners assume their council tax status is fixed, but in 2026 that assumption no longer holds. Another overlooked issue is exemptions and discounts. Single occupancy reductions, disability-related adjustments, and age-related relief still exist, but they are not always applied automatically. Councils increasingly expect residents to actively confirm eligibility, and missing paperwork or outdated records can mean paying more than necessary. The system is becoming more administrative, less forgiving, and more dependent on accurate information. The practical response is awareness rather than alarm. Seniors who periodically check their council tax band, review eligibility for discounts, and read council notices carefully are better positioned to manage rising costs. Council tax may feel like a background expense, but in 2026 it reflects a broader shift. Local authorities passing financial pressure down quietly, household by household. Understanding how your council applies the rules can make the difference between manageable increases and unexpected strain. Number 4. NHS priority. NHS priority rules in 2026 are changing less through cuts and more through structure, and that distinction matters. The system is moving steadily toward digital-first healthcare, where online forms, app-based triage, and remote assessments often decide who is seen, how quickly, and by whom. On paper, this is about efficiency. In reality, it reshapes access. Seniors who are less comfortable with digital systems risk becoming invisible, not because they don't need care, but because the system increasingly responds first to those who navigate it fastest. This pressure is most visible in high-demand areas like Manchester and Greater London, where GP shortages, hospital backlogs, and population density combine to stretch capacity. Here, digital triage often acts as a gatekeeper rather than a convenience. Symptoms entered online determine urgency, and incomplete or unclear submissions can result in longer waits or repeated follow-ups. Another subtle shift is how priority is defined. Age alone no longer guarantees faster access. Instead, priority is increasingly based on risk scoring, symptom classification, and prior engagement with NHS systems. Seniors who miss routine check-ins or fail to update records may find themselves slipping down the queue without realizing it. This doesn't mean the NHS is abandoning older patients. It means the system now expects participation in new ways. Staying visible becomes essential. That includes remaining registered with a GP, keeping contact details updated, responding promptly to messages, and understanding how local practices handle triage. In many areas, phone access still exists, but it often competes with digital pathways rather than replacing them. The challenge for seniors is not medical complexity, it's administrative friction. When healthcare access depends on forms, timing, and classification, delays often happen quietly, not dramatically. In 2026, NHS priority is less about emergency doors closing and more about slow access narrowing. Seniors who understand how their local system works, especially in busy regions, reduce the risk of being overlooked. The goal is not to master technology, but to ensure the system continues to see you clearly, consistently, and at the right time. Number 5. Inheritance rules. Inheritance rules in 2026 are tightening in ways that place far greater emphasis on transparency, timing, and documentation. The changes don't radically rewrite inheritance tax overnight, but they do expand how gifts, transfers, and estates are reported and cross-checked. What once relied on family records and solicitor files is increasingly supported by digital reporting and data sharing between departments. This means gifts made years earlier, money transfers, property assistance, or informal financial support to children, are more visible than many seniors expect. The impact is especially significant in areas such as Surrey, Kent, and the West Midlands, where property ownership and intergenerational support are common and estate values often sit near key thresholds. What creates stress is not the existence of rules, but the surprise of how strictly they are applied. Families often assume that small, well-intentioned gifts won't matter later. Under the updated approach, patterns matter. Repeated transfers, unclear dates, or undocumented intentions can raise questions during estate reviews. Another important shift is responsibility. Executors and family members are expected to provide clearer evidence, and errors are less likely to be quietly corrected by the system. This places emotional pressure on families already dealing with loss. The solution is surprisingly simple: habits, not loopholes. Keeping clear records of gifts, noting dates and amounts, and storing relevant correspondence can prevent confusion years later. Even basic written explanations of intent can reduce disputes and delays. Seniors who organize paperwork gradually, rather than leaving it for later, protect not just their assets, but their families from administrative stress. Inheritance in 2026 is no longer just about what you leave behind. It's about how clearly your decisions can be understood after you're gone. Transparency, once optional, is becoming the default expectation. Those who treat documentation as part of everyday financial hygiene tend to preserve clarity and calm. Those who don't often leave loved ones navigating uncertainty at the worst possible moment. Number 6. Driving rules. Driving rules in 2026 are evolving quietly, but for seniors they carry serious consequences if misunderstood. The biggest shift is the expansion of medical disclosure requirements. Conditions that were once discussed casually with a GP are now more clearly defined as reportable, placing greater responsibility on drivers to self-declare changes in health. This doesn't mean automatic license loss, but it does mean the burden of accuracy has shifted. The system increasingly assumes that drivers will proactively report relevant conditions rather than wait to be asked. Enforcement is also becoming more visible, particularly in large urban areas such as London and Birmingham, where traffic monitoring, automated checks, and data sharing between agencies are more advanced. In these cities, inconsistencies between medical records and license declarations are more likely to be flagged, not through roadside stops, but through background verification. What worries many seniors is the fear of getting it wrong. The rules can feel vague, and no one wants to overreport and risk unnecessary restrictions, or underreport and face penalties later. This is where routine replaces anxiety. A simple, repeatable habit can make compliance manageable. Once a year, review your health status honestly, note any new diagnoses or medication changes, and check whether they fall under disclosure guidance. If unsure, confirming in writing, through a GP or official guidance, creates a record that protects you. Another overlooked detail is renewal timing. License renewals, medical confirmations, and supporting documents now align more closely, meaning delays or missing information can interrupt driving privileges temporarily. For seniors who rely on driving for independence, even a short disruption can affect daily life. The intention behind these changes isn't to push older drivers off the road, but to reduce risk through clearer accountability. However, systems don't judge context, they judge compliance. Seniors who treat driving rules as an ongoing responsibility rather than a one-time check tend to stay confident and in control. In 2026, safe driving is no longer just about how you drive, it's about how well your records reflect your reality. Keeping those aligned quietly protects your license, your freedom, and your peace of mind. Number 7. Housing pressure. Housing pressure in 2026 is less about forcing moves and more about quietly reshaping incentives, and for many seniors, that distinction matters. New policies increasingly encourage downsizing, redevelopment, and efficient use of housing stock, especially in areas facing shortages. On the surface, these measures are framed as practical responses to demand. In reality, they change the balance of choice. Older homeowners may find that staying put becomes gradually more expensive, less supported, or administratively more complex. This trend is especially visible in cities such as Leeds, Manchester, and Bristol, where regeneration projects, planning revisions, and housing targets place pressure on long-held residential areas. The challenge for seniors isn't sudden eviction, it's gradual narrowing of options. Maintenance costs rise, council policies shift, and neighborhoods change around properties that were once considered stable long-term homes. Another subtle factor is how support is structured. Incentives to move, adapt, or release equity may be offered in ways that feel optional but become harder to refuse over time. When combined with care costs, council tax adjustments, and energy efficiency rules, housing decisions stop being purely personal. They become financial calculations shaped by policy. The risk comes when decisions are delayed until pressure peaks, after a health change, a financial shock, or a planning notice, when flexibility is lowest. Evaluating options early preserves choice. That means understanding the true cost of staying, the realistic benefits and drawbacks of downsizing, and the long-term implications of redevelopment in your area. It also means separating emotional attachment from practical sustainability, without rushing into decisions driven by fear. Seniors who assess their housing position calmly and ahead of time tend to move on their own terms, if they move at all. Those who wait often feel pushed rather than guided. In 2026, housing pressure is not a single rule or notice. It's a slow, accumulating force. Recognizing it early allows homeowners to remain decision-makers rather than respondents, choosing what fits their life rather than what the system gradually nudges them toward. Number 8. Energy support. Energy support in 2026 is changing shape, and for many seniors the difference will be felt most clearly during winter. The shift is away from broad, universal help toward tighter means testing and targeted assistance. On paper, this is about directing support to those who need it most. In practice, it introduces complexity, timing issues, and a higher risk of people falling through the cracks. Colder regions are especially exposed, and cities such as Newcastle and Sheffield face sharper consequences because heating is not optional for large parts of the year. When temperatures drop, even short gaps in support can translate into significant household stress. One of the biggest misunderstandings is the assumption that eligibility is static. In reality, means testing relies on income thresholds, benefit status, household composition, and sometimes energy efficiency ratings. A small change, such as a pension adjustment, a change in living arrangements, or a missed form, can quietly alter eligibility. Support that arrived automatically in the past may now require confirmation, reapplication, or additional evidence. Another overlooked issue is timing. Energy help often arrives after assessments are completed, not when bills peak. Seniors who wait until winter to check eligibility may find that the process lags behind their immediate needs. This is where overlooked checks matter. Reviewing benefit status, confirming council tax records, and ensuring energy suppliers have accurate household details can protect winter budgets more effectively than searching for emergency help later. There is also a growing link between energy support and broader data systems, meaning inconsistencies across records can delay or reduce assistance. None of this is designed to punish, but systems prioritize accuracy over urgency. Seniors who treat energy support as something to review annually, rather than something that simply appears, are better positioned to manage costs. In 2026, energy help isn't disappearing. It's becoming conditional and procedural. For those in colder regions, awareness becomes a form of insulation. By understanding how eligibility works and checking details early, seniors reduce the risk of facing winter bills without the support they assumed would be there. Number 9. Digital ID. Digital ID is moving from a future concept to an everyday requirement in 2026, and for many seniors this change feels bigger than it first appears. Expanded digital verification is being introduced across services and benefits, meaning proof of identity is increasingly confirmed online rather than in person. This includes access to government portals, benefit management, NHS systems, and even some local council services. The intention is efficiency and fraud prevention, but the experience can feel overwhelming if you're not prepared. Early rollout areas such as London and Manchester are already showing how quickly digital ID becomes the default rather than the alternative. In these cities, in-person options still exist, but they are often slower or limited, making digital verification the fastest path through the system. One of the biggest concerns for seniors is the fear of being locked out. Digital ID systems rely on accurate records, secure logins, and consistent access to email or mobile numbers. A forgotten password, an outdated phone number, or confusion during setup can temporarily block access to essential services. What's important to understand is that digital ID isn't about technical skill, it's about organization. Simple steps make a significant difference. Keeping identity documents in one place, ensuring contact details are up to date, and setting aside time to complete verification calmly rather than under pressure reduces frustration. Another overlooked aspect is security confidence. Many seniors worry about scams and data misuse, which leads some to avoid digital systems altogether. Unfortunately, avoidance can increase risk rather than reduce it, especially when deadlines or verifications are missed. Learning the official channels and recognizing legitimate requests helps separate real systems from fraudulent ones. Digital ID is also becoming interconnected. Once set up correctly, it can actually simplify interactions by reducing repeated checks across departments. The problem arises when setup is rushed or incomplete. In 2026, digital ID is less about forcing technology on people and more about redefining access. Seniors who approach it early, on their own terms, tend to feel more in control. Those who wait often encounter it during stressful moments, when clarity is hardest to find. Preparation turns digital ID from a barrier into a tool. Number 10. System stack. What makes 2026 different isn't any single law, it's how these laws now work together. This is the system stack effect, where small, reasonable changes begin to overlap and quietly reduce flexibility over time. Care cost rules interact with housing policy. Council tax pressure feeds into downsizing decisions. Digital ID systems connect pensions, energy support, and NHS access. None of these changes are dramatic on their own, but when layered, they reshape daily life in subtle ways. The danger isn't shock, it's compression. Options that once existed side by side slowly narrow into fewer, more rigid paths. A delayed pension payment affects energy eligibility. A housing decision influences care funding. A missed digital verification slows access across multiple services. Each system assumes the others are functioning perfectly, but real life rarely works that way. This is how independence erodes quietly, not through one big loss, but through a series of small constraints. Flexibility used to come from gaps between systems. In 2026, those gaps are closing. Data is shared more widely, decisions are automated faster, and exceptions are harder to secure without preparation. For seniors, this creates a new reality. Reacting late is far more costly than planning early. Awareness becomes a form of control. Knowing how systems connect allows you to anticipate pressure points before they collide. It means understanding that a decision in one area, housing, health, finances, will likely echo elsewhere. This isn't about mastering bureaucracy, it's about recognizing patterns. Those who see the system as a whole are better able to protect their independence within it. The most resilient seniors are not the wealthiest or the most technical, they are the most informed. They ask questions earlier, keep records cleaner, and make decisions before urgency takes over. In 2026, freedom doesn't disappear overnight. It shrinks quietly when people assume systems still work in isolation. The system stack rewards awareness and punishes delay. Understanding how these rules combine is no longer optional. It's the difference between steering your life and being steered by processes you never meant to trigger. If even one of these changes made you stop and think, that's not a coincidence. It means this information matters to you. Tell me in the comments which law feels closest to your own life right now, because your experience helps others see what's coming. If you want to understand where all this is heading next, watch our previous video on what the UK could look like by 2030. And if you value calm, research-driven reporting that respects your time and intelligence, support this work by subscribing. It's just one click, and it truly makes a difference.